Welcome to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with theater's biggest names. I'm your host, Alan Seals.
And I'm your producer, Jillian Hockman.
And I'm losing my voice.
It's okay. You sound great.
Well, I don't really need it. It's only, a podcast thing that I'm doing here.
You can be the first silent podcast host.
All right, here we go. Here's my silent podcasting.
All the awards.
Yes, I love it. We invented something new. Okay, so this episode is with Tom Kitt. Jillian, what did you think about this one?
I really, really love Tom's authenticity. He is a great composer and a great all-around music guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I love Next to Normal. I love so many of his shows, and I love how real they always feel. They are they come from the human experience, and he is just such a great writer, and you get all the feels when you listen to his music.
Yeah, he was literally just a kid. A kid to me. He was in his mid-20s when he wrote Next to Normal. And that is similar to Superhero, which just opened at second stage, but we actually get into this in the podcast, and he's now 45, having written Superhero. He looks at things from the other side of parenthood. Was that apparent to you, I guess, listening to Next to Normal and then listening to the interview? Like, what did you feel about that?
Yeah, but he also, you can tell where he's coming from, but you also can see that he understands the various perspectives and the way that different people feel, and he can empathize and put himself in situations that make it so anyone can love his art, even if you are not the 45-year-old man or the 25-year-old kid who wrote the show. It doesn't matter.
Right. It was actually surprising to me as a true reflection here that he doesn't have a set way of approaching a project. He said that sometimes he writes the music first, sometimes he writes the lyrics first, sometimes he's handed something where stuff is partially written and he just goes with it. Sometimes he writes the music and then has to fit the script into that.
However inspiration strikes, just get it out.
And I guess it works. I mean, the dude's got a Pulitzer for this stuff, so
and a couple Tonys.
And a couple Tonys and lots of
a very nice shelf.
A very nice shelf of things in his house, I'm sure. So everybody please enjoy this episode here with the one and only Tom Kitt.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
So this bio here, actually, I have to admit, was mostly stolen from mtishows.com because it was the best write-up that I could find.
Okay.
And for length, I shortened it. And this is, even as long as it still is, it's still the highlights. So I cannot wait to get into this stuff with you. But he has received the 2010 Pulitzer Prize for drama, as well as 2 Tony Awards for Best Score and Best Orchestration for Next to Normal. He's also the composer of If Then, which also got a Tony nomination and Outer Critics nomination. High Fidelity, Bring It On, and Bring It On the musical with Lin-Manuel, co-composer with Lin-Manuel Miranda, among many others. He's a composer, arranger, orchestrator, whose credits include SpongeBob SquarePants the Musical, which was also a Tony nomination for him, an Outer Critics nomination, and Drama Desk nomination. Head Over Heels, Jagged Little Pill, Grease Live, American Idiot, and then his work with Green Day also includes additional arrangements for their Grammy Award-winning album, 21st Century Breakdown. He's received an Emmy Award as a co-writer, again with Lin-Manuel Miranda, for the 2013 Tony Award opening number, Bigger. He has TV songwriting credits, including Royal Pains, Penny Dreadful, and Sesame Street, one of my kids' personal favorites, of course. As a musical director, conductor, arranger, and orchestrator, credits include Pitch Perfect films, 2 cellos featuring Lang Lang, the Kennedy Center Auditors, 13, so much more. Then upcoming projects include musical adaptations of the films Almost Famous, Magic Mike, and The Visitor, and his work is currently at the time this will air, but at the time of recording, about to open tomorrow at Second Stage, a musical called Superhero. Tom Kitt, oh my gosh, thank you for being here with me, and thank you for sitting through that wonderful monologue.
Thank you for reading that and for having me today.
So on this podcast, we like to start at the very beginning of your life and your interest in everything. So where did you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island in Port Washington. I lived there until I was 13, and then my parents moved us to the Banksville area of Westchester, which is right between Bedford and Greenwich, Connecticut. And I went to school in Armonk. So the Armonk, New York area is where I spent high school. And I started playing the piano when I was 4 years old. My brother and sister were both playing, and I just started to sit down and play things that I was hearing in the house. And what I found out later is that I have perfect pitch, which basically means that I can hear a note and just tell you immediately what it is, and it helps me figure things out pretty quickly on the piano by ear. So I was 4 years old. My mother took me to the teacher that was instructing my brother and sister, and she said, I think he's too young. I don't normally work with kids that age. But I sat down and played for her, and she took me on as a student, and I started training classically. I was pretty much strictly classical until about 12, 13. I was writing music, writing classical pieces, and then I went to a camp called Camp Alton, which sadly is no longer around, but it was on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. A number of camps are up there, and it was run by a man named Peter Gorelnik, who is a very famous and well-renowned journalist, rock journalist, and wrote books on Elvis Presley and Sam Cooke and soul music. And he had it was a sports camp. You would go up there and compete, 2 teams over the course of the entire summer, but there was a wonderful musical aspect, and there was a band that was based on the Blues Brothers called the Allman Brothers, and they were musicians who during the year played around and were quite talented. So they pulled me in as a 13-year-old kid who had never soloed before, and suddenly I was playing Sam and Dave and Ray Charles and having the time of my life. And then another camper introduced me to Billy Joel, and I started listening to the early Billy Joel albums, Piano Man, Turnstile, Street Life Serenade. So I suddenly became obsessed with Billy Joel, and subsequently Elton John and Simon and Garfunkel and James Taylor, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. So through my years in high school, I was writing songs now and writing lyrics for the first time, and then I went to Columbia, which is where I met my 2 wives, or my 2 spouses, Rita Pietropinto, who I'm still married to happily, and we just celebrated, or we're going to celebrate 19 years this year, which is wonderful. We have 3 children, and Rita introduced me to Brian Yorkey, and that changed my life because that's where I realized I wanted to write musicals, and Brian and I forged a collaboration and a friendship, and all of that led to Next to Normal.
Wow.
That's sort of a brief history.
That was
sure, I could fill in more blanks.
So if my math is right, you got married at 26?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. 26. And then
year 2000, so it's easy for me to
yes,
calculate.
Because tomorrow is your birthday. Yeah,
tomorrow is my 45th birthday. Yes.
Happy birthday!
Thank you.
And what a special birthday celebration that Superhero is opening.
Yeah,
tell me about that. What is Superhero?
So Superhero is a musical that I came up with this idea, I think around 2009 or 2010. I've always been obsessed with comics and superhero stories and origin stories. From at the age of 4, I remember my parents taking me to the original Superman film, and I'll never forget the opening credits, the music, the names flying through space. I always thought, God, you'd be the coolest person if your name was flying through space to the music of John Williams. But I just remember the story and how gradual the telling of it was. Superman doesn't even come into the film until an hour in. There's so much beautiful story of Clark Kent and how he's adopted by a couple who could never have kids. The sad destruction of his planet and his parents sending him to safety. It just had a hope and a beauty and a stillness that I just thought, I think there's a musical there in the superhero genre, but maybe it goes against a little bit what we expect. There's not a villain. There's not big action. It really speaks to what I think superheroes represent in the world right now, which is the need to believe in something, that there are forces out there that are looking out for us. For me, as the father of 3, I I often shudder at the world and the things that I see and feel. It's a hard world. It's a wonderful world, and you have to grab onto the hope and the beauty. But we're shown images every day that shake us, and I just felt like I wanted to put something out there for my kids that would speak to them, speak to the fact that I know as a parent I can't protect them from everything, but I'm going to do my best to be there for them always, and also that I trust that they're going to go out into the world and find their own way. And certainly, as you become a parent, your mortality becomes pretty clear. You start to sense things in new ways as a parent, and I think all of those ideas were at the center of this. So I just was walking around with this small story of a family and a mysterious person who moves into their building, and perhaps or perhaps not is a superhero. And I pitched that idea to John Logan, John, the brilliant writer of the play Red and numerous wonderful screenplays. John was looking to write a musical, and I was brought into his office to have a general meeting, and I just pitched him this idea. And thankfully, he jokes that he did the thing your agents tell you never to do, which is he said yes
right away. Yeah,
and we started working on it and beating the story out, and then John, which is a great gift for me, especially, or I should say, was a great gift for me, especially since I was writing. I wanted to take on the lyrics for the first time. John went and wrote a draft of the book and had song ideas, and within those song ideas, he had dialogue, he had conversations, monologues. There was so much for me to draw from, and the writing of this show just was always so easy. And nothing is easy, but I was just always so inspired about the subject matter and what John was creating, and it's really been a privilege and a pleasure from day one.
How does the process work for those of us who don't know, including myself for a lot of this? I come from the acting side of this, where you get a casting call, or later on in the business, like your agent or your manager or whatever, they send you out and you go there and you audition, and like the song's already there and the script is mostly there and everything. But when you're starting from nothing, you go into a room and you pitch this. All right, so then what? Okay, he said yes. You want to work on it. How long did it take before you started composing?
It took a few years. And John lived on the West Coast, so there was a period after we had said we were going to do this that we got caught up in other things, but we reconnected. And I just remember John and I sitting together for a week and really talking through the story, talking through the characters. I can't say enough about what the book writer brings to the process. It's really, in my opinion, the unsung hero, not in terms of us in the community. We know how important it is, but it's just it's the lifeblood of the musical. The musical does not work without the book, without a sound book. And so we knew that we didn't want to really start writing anything until we had the story, and of course it was going to change. And it did. We threw out characters, created new ones, but the main trio at the center of this story existed from day one. And John took that and ran with it. And as I said, he created a whole book for me to work from. And I think musicals happen in all different ways. Next to Normal, we just started writing songs. We had a basic story, and then we wrote a bunch of songs and had to go back and outline and figure out how we were going to put them into the story. And Brian and I would always laugh about that and say, well, this is the way not to do it. but it worked out, but took a number of years for us to cobble that together. And in this case, just for me, having been through the process, it just was very organic and methodical. And as I said, I had so much to work with when I started writing the first song.
That's interesting. I was actually going to bring that up a little bit later, but you brought up Next to Normal. You've had so much success. The show had so much success. And I guess superhero, when I was reading the synopsis of superhero, I couldn't help but think that it harkened back a little bit to kind of the general like dysfunctional family sort of, family personality issues that Next to Normal highlights. And was that on purpose, or is that coming from a place inside you that you may not want to talk about?
I think that's something I'm drawn to as a writer. I think human connection, human themes, our frailty, our inability sometimes to connect in the way that we need to, and then how satisfying and beautiful it is when we finally do. Those are things that I just love to write about. I love to write about the human experience. And I definitely think Superhero is a companion piece with Next to Normal. Next to Normal was something I started writing when I was 24 years old.
Wow.
And I think that I was closer, obviously, to my younger years at that point. I was writing, having just been a teenager, and was drawing on a lot of that experience. I wasn't yet a father. I was getting married 2 years later. Superhero now is really about the father, the parent side of it for me, and it's still my desire to bring human themes to a show and put myself on stage in terms of the things I'm passionate about, the things I'm thinking. There's so many personal aspects of my life in Superhero, and I just feel like as a writer, that's been something I've always wanted to draw from, the personal experience. And with Next to Normal, we would get people to come up and ask if the show is autobiographical in any way because of how people were affected by it. And what's so gratifying is that I've gotten a lot of the same questions about Superhero. And it's the same answer. There are parts of it that are drawn from my life. So yes, it's autobiographical in some sense, but the major thing at the center of it isn't. And I'm gratified that the show is speaking in such a way that people have that question.
Wow, I can see that a lot, and I wonder too, because I speak to a lot of writers. I wonder where some of this comes from, and I think a lot of it is, if you're a good writer, you have to be a very observational person, and then it's just a little bit, or maybe a lot bit of imagination to take what could be like this small amount of an idea or a story that you observe to somebody else, or that even may have happened to you, and make it into this big thing.
Yeah.
So it's impressive to me how you can do that sort of thing. And then even more impressive, though, that you said Next to Normal was written with the songs first, because then you got to go back and write the script. Would you do that again?
I'm open to anything that gets
really hard.
Anything that gets you rolling. Brian and I just love to write songs together. And that the other thing about Next to Normal was that I don't think either of us were convinced in any way that was going to be our show. It was the first show we were working on. It actually came out of a 10-minute musical assignment at the BMI Musical Theater Workshop. And I think we both thought it was going to be one and done. We would do this, but we started working on something else. And then Brian or I would say, hey, let's write another song for Feeling Electric, which is what it was called at that time. Let's just write another Feeling Electric song. And we just kept writing them. And finally, we looked at each other and said, look, if we want to write these many songs for it, we should probably see if we can actually make a musical out of it. So I think that sort of first album quality to Next to Normal, it was going to be unwieldy. It was going to be kind of all over the place. We were figuring it out. We were young. We were trying to support ourselves, which I still try to do as a writer. But we just didn't know the way it was going to go. And looking back, there's so many angels who came to our aid to help us get through that and to believe in us. The Larson Foundation, who gave us a grant to do a workshop at a point when I thought the show might have been over. Of course, Second Stage, David Stone, on and on. They're just people who always believed in that show. And so I think to say, well, it should have been this methodical process. It's just where we were in our lives and how we came to Next Normal. It was just never going to be that way.
Huh. The show, you mentioned that you got a grant. I was going to ask next, when you're creating a musical based on music first, is that harder, or was it harder in your experience to get financing, to get a production team behind you, or do you go with the script and they say, I'm gonna give you money for that script versus I'll give you money for those songs?
You mean something like Next to Normal?
Yeah.
I think the thing that we did, and I'm sure other young writers do, is just try to get some buzz out there, get your songs performed, get people to talk about it. Kurt Deutsch was someone who was instrumental. He committed to a concert reading through his label Shikaboom, and this was in 2002, and helped us get Sherry Renee Scott and Norbert Leo Butz to perform, and Greg Naughton to perform a concert version. And there were a lot of people there that night. And even though the show wasn't ready by any stretch, people remembered it. People were talking about it. And so when the Larson grant came and we did a workshop at the Village Theater, and we had applied, I believe, to the O'Neill, people were just aware of the show. And even though we didn't get into the O'Neill at that point, people were talking about it and recommending it, and somehow it found its way to NYMF. And suddenly we were at the New York Musical Theater Festival, and that was a huge step for us. We had Anthony Rapp and Amy Spanger in the show, and Joe Cassidy. And the show was 3 hours, although David Stone likes to say it was 6. But you could tell there was something happening with it. People were having an emotional response to it. So that was really the point where finally people were coming forward and saying, we see a production in this show's future. But we just did everything we could to keep the ball in the air. And you do that on your own, but also you need people that say, I believe in this piece. I'm going to give you this opportunity, and I know it's going to pay off sometime down the road.
Well, obviously, you did. You get the Pulitzer for drama for that. Did you see that coming?
No, you can't see that coming. How can anyone see that coming? It was unbelievable, and I still can't believe it. It's just an extraordinary feeling to have that moment. And
do you remember where you were when you first were told?
Yes, I do remember because. The way it works, or the way it worked for us, is we were told I think either Friday or Saturday before it was announced, that we were in consideration, and that we just needed to let our press people know where we were going to be on Monday at 3, which is they announce it because I think it goes online and it's instantaneous. So I was in the middle of tech for American Idiot. This was April of 2010. So I was sitting with Tom Hulse in the theater, and we were just talking. I said, "Yeah, I told him the story, and so maybe at 3 p.m. I'll get a phone call. We'll see." And at 3 p.m. I got a phone call from David Stone, and I just started shouting expletives up and down the aisle. I just couldn't believe it, and it was a wonderful place to get that news because I was around my theater family,
right?
And Michael Mayer announced it from the microphone on stage, and actually they were filming a documentary that eventually became Broadway Idiot. And so there's footage, I guess, of me doing this and yelling, and the cast coming up and everyone hugging me, and it was beautiful. And then Brian and I came to Michael Hartman's office, and we didn't know where we were, and it was quite an honor. It still is, and I still can't believe it.
That's incredible. Did it change your the career trajectory at that point, or because Next to Normal had already, I think, probably catapulted you to a new level, but did that affect anything in a different way?
It definitely does, because it is now the thing that defines me. And even when you read the bio, that's the first thing, and it's and I'm usually referred to as a Pulitzer Prize winning author, and that gives you goosebumps. And I've had an interesting road. My first show on Broadway ran for 10 days, so I've really experienced the highs and the lows. I had an 18-month-old child at that point. I had just quit jobs that I was doing to support myself. I had to go back to those jobs with the uncertainty of whether anything was going to work out for me in the way that I was hoping I'd be able to have a career in this. I had the show Feeling Electric that was in development, but who knew how that was going to go? And then suddenly, that show, in the middle of a financial crisis, you open the small musical on Broadway that finds its way. Who would have saw that coming? And everything that came after it just was unbelievable to me, and just beyond expectations. So yes, it definitely defines you in terms of an award and putting you on a certain level. But it also was what made me feel like, okay, I think I'm going to be able to have a career. I think I'm going to be able to work in this art form. And I can hopefully push some things that are passionate to me. Because Next to Normal, there are a lot of people that hearing that subject matter would probably say, you can't do a musical about that. There were plenty of people who did say that. But now, if you open up a conversation with something that might seem a little unorthodox, they might say now, okay, tell me more.
Come From Away. Come From Away, perfect example, right?
Yeah.
A musical about 9/11, I wouldn't have guessed that would have been one of my favorite musicals of all time, right?
We were instructed at BMI. We were always people always mentioned breaking the mold, breaking new ground, trying to find a way to move the needle forward. And we looked at the musicals that did that. And of course, you can never know as a writer if you're ever going to be able to achieve that. And I would never say it. I'm too respectful of this art form to ever assume anything about what I bring to it. But I do feel like Next to Normal came out of the challenge that was laid to us to find shows that were unexpected and created an exhilarating experience in the theater that said to people, oh, wow, you can do that. Because those kinds of shows for me, Company, Into the Woods, Cabaret, those are the things that made me want to be a writer.
Mm-hmm. Well, where I guess did you, let's back up that conversation, I guess, a little bit. To the very beginning, you were saying at a young age, like you did piano, you did classical, but I don't recall you saying why you got into theater and musical theater.
Well, when I was a kid, my grandparents would take me to the matinees on Broadway. So we saw Peter Pan, and I saw Cats, and I saw Chorus Line, and it was something that I just associated with family gatherings, and because I was so into the classical and then into the singer-songwriter, I wasn't seeing that trajectory for myself. And it was really when I got to Columbia and Rita introduced me to Brian, and we wrote what's called The Varsity Show. It's a book musical written by students about Columbia life, and it's got a rich history. Rodgers and Hart, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Janine Tesori, Terrence McNally, just some of the people who worked on The Varsity Show, and they were at Columbia. That was the thing where I got the bug, because it was a process unlike anything I'd ever been through. Writing songs for other voices, multiple voices, writing comedy songs, telling a story through song and watching an audience respond to it, hoping they'll laugh, hoping they'll cry. I remember when I was a senior, Brian and I wrote our second Varsity Show, and it was the premise was about 3 students at Columbia, and God and the devil have a bet about whether their 4 years at Columbia will make them sell their soul or not. And it was personal story for me, because I was considering some job opportunities that were going to take me outside of my dreams. And
you were at school for economics.
I was an economics major, and these are wonderful jobs, and but I knew they weren't the jobs for me, and I felt like I would be going after what I considered to be more stability and money at that point, at the expense of something that I had grown up dreaming I would do. So I got a job offer. I turned it down and went into the uncertain world of piano bar and teaching piano lessons and anything else I could do to find my way, and writing. And that was a scary decision, but it was the decision that I had built up to. And so writing that show was very cathartic for me. And I remember hearing a student beg someone for a ticket because it was sold out and they heard so much about it. And they said to someone, come on, you've seen it. This is my one chance to see it. And I just thought, oh my God, I've made something that someone feels that passionate about. What a great feeling that my personal story matters. So that was really the point where I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to tell these stories and write songs.
That's interesting that you said that. The person who was begging to get in, I suspect that the people who really want to hear it, the people that are passionate about that, they relate to it. They have to, because it's an emotional response to want to get into something that much.
Yes.
And do you find that in your career, or have you found that in that, I guess maybe stage door experiences or fan experiences where you have people come up and like thank you for allowing them to express themselves through your work because they're too afraid or they have some other reason why they can't talk about it in the same way?
it means the world to me. And I've been fortunate that I've had people come up to me and share their experiences and their feelings about the work and what it's meant to them. I'll never forget when Brian and I were in previews for Next Normal on Broadway. There was a teenage boy who came up to us and said he had been diagnosed bipolar a few months earlier, and he wanted to thank me because he felt like he had something that he could point to and tell his friends about. That's what he was going through. And then recently on Superhero, because at the center of Superhero is loss, the loss of a father, husband, and we've had people who have experienced that in their lives. And again, someone came up and said that they felt like they had that the show gave them something to talk about, and it was cathartic, and they could reference in talking to their son, and that's just that's why I do it. You can never predict what people are going to take away from your piece, and as I said, I've been through every version of that, and even on the things that take something like Next to Normal. There are people who will go to Next to Normal and not have that experience. But what you can feel collectively, what I felt at Next Normal, and what I'm feeling at Superhero, is people breathing with the piece, and experiencing something that feels personal and cathartic, and when people come up to me and share that it's made them feel that way. There was a young girl last night who came up to me and said that she related to Simon, the teenage boy at the center of Superhero, and that she was going to come back. I mean, someone who related to it so personally and didn't feel like it had pushed her away from the piece, but it pulled her to it. That's the greatest compliment I can receive.
It sounds like free therapy. Not that they're paying for tickets, but in a lot of cases, I think, especially in this country, and I've said this before on this podcast too, that people are afraid to talk about mental health. And the way that you just described how people come up to you and share their stories, it sounds to me like, they can point to that and say, oh, that's how I'm feeling. I don't know how to talk about it. I've never been trained how to talk about my feelings properly, but that's it.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful thing to me to hear about this. And I understand, from an outsider's perspective, someone who can't play piano and always wished that he could, but I love music, so I wish that I could just, I feel music. I close my eyes and even at raves, at clubs, they turn up the bass because you want to feel that. You want to be connected. Music, it's vibration. It connects you with other people. And then if you can add the emotional story behind it, just beautiful.
I think art is the ultimate teacher. I think that there's nothing that gives us a sense of empathy and understanding and connection than an experience in art, and to get inside someone's mind. If you're an actor, to play another role, to literally step inside someone's shoes. It's why it's maddening to me anytime I hear of people trying to cut arts programs or arts education. Yeah, the statistics are just so telling of what it gives our kids, and to have my kids grow up in this world, to see this community up close, it's the greatest education I could give them. So I think anytime we can experience that, and if something does speak to you personally, it's going to affect you. It's going to change your way of thinking. That's just what's going to happen. You're going to ruminate on something, and if you're a young kid and you see a movie that depicts the dangers of bullying and shows someone who is being bullied rise above that, I would hope that you're going to come out of that saying, I'm going to speak up when I see that. I'm not going to be someone who does that. So telling these stories, it's just so important, and especially, I think, for the young people in the world right now.
Yeah. It's just beautiful. As a father myself too, I think about my kids, and I want the best for them. I hope that they will do well. Like you said earlier, that they're going to find their own way in the world, and you hope that you can teach them as best as you can, because you can't always be there for them.
Yep.
And then even some of the stuff I teach them, I'm sure, is probably not best for them, because we're all imperfect. But your kids growing up in this in this field, in this area, in theater. I mean, this is New York City. This is the heart of it. This is like where some of the best always come and always perform. And, you are a case in point. You live here, right? One of the best.
It's amazing. And I mean, if I look at the shows that my kids have now grown up in, they were a little young for Next to Normal and American Idiot, but Bring It On and If Then and Head Over Heels and Jagged Little Pill and Dave and now Superhero, SpongeBob, it's just like every one of these shows teaches them something, brings them into a world of imagination, of diversity and acceptance and love, and that's just the shows that I've worked on, and then there are all the shows I brought them to. So I can see it's affected them in this beautiful way. My son is now playing Joseph. He's going to be.
I was going to ask if they're getting into it too.
Freaky Friday, another one that they just loved, and actually, my son played a role in that musical last summer, and my daughter did The Lion King at school, and they just love it. It's just it really opens up their hearts in this beautiful way, and I feel fortunate that I get to share it with them.
So they sound a little older. You said in high school and stuff. When did they realize, or have they realized yet that Daddy's a big deal?
Well, they're not. So the ages are 13, 9, and 6.
Oh,
they're it's funny because in the theater community, or if I'm around theater people, sometimes they'll come up to me and someone will bring a Next to Normal playbill or CD for me to sign, and it's funny because my kids, their eyes will widen. Who was that? What is that? What does that mean? And, we've me and Rita have done have gone to great lengths to normalize everything. There are certain things that are hard. It's very public. I'm opening a show tomorrow. They're going to celebrate this with me. But there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot that's unknown, and I'm going to go through a very human experience tomorrow. But it'll be nice to have them with me to I'll just look at them and say, that's what matters.
It's interesting to think about, I guess, being the child of someone that is idolized by others, because the people who would idolize like a celebrity, they don't see the everyday side. They don't see the human side, the emotional side. And then your kids, of course, like they're with you. They're every day. They see you in a completely different way that nobody else most likely ever will. And so it makes total sense to me why they would not see daddy or mommy or whoever it is. If you're Julia Roberts' kids, then at what point are you like, wow, she's one of the most respected, best actresses in the industry, and she brings me to parties, and I have access to all these celebrities that nobody else knows about. Like, it's so commonplace to them. And probably, like, you bring your kids now, right? And like, how many people that nobody else will ever get to meet will be at your opening night tomorrow that you've worked with? Like Lin-Manuel, for example. I don't know if he'll be there tomorrow, but you've worked with him multiple times.
But what's great is that everyone in this community has treated my family with such love, and Lin-Manuel and my oldest son, really all my kids, but Michael and Lin forged a bond early on. Lin was at his birthday parties. I have a great picture of Michael and Lin when I finally took Michael to Hamilton, and Lin was at his bar mitzvah. And I think we all realize that family relationships, loyalty, kindness, these are the things that matter and sustain us, because the topsy-turvy world of what we do is you just never know what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But the things that you can rely on, people who love you, people who care about you, when High Fidelity didn't take, and I had so many people reach out to me and congratulate me and say that they were there for me, I'll never forget that, and that's what kept me going. Mm-hmm. So it's really it's been normal for the kids, because Cameron Crowe, who I'm working with on Almost Famous, who's become such an important and wonderful friend to me, he's been hanging out with my kids, and I sometimes look at that and I think, do you know who this is? Do you know who this person is meant to the lives of your mother and me? I mean, we were first dating when Singles was out, and my wife had a poster in her dorm room, and I mean, this is unbelievable to suddenly be side by side. But then you're just people, and you have things in common, and you have similar passions, and I think the more normal it feels, the better, because I certainly wouldn't want to drop by and have people treating me in a strange way. I just want to be Tom and come by and be down to earth with everybody.
Yeah. Gosh, that's incredible. Like to think about, like you show up and you are the person that other people have idolized, but don't feel that way. It's just this weird dichotomy that.
I mean, I pinch myself continuously.
Right,
in
Pulitzer
this
Prize winning,
world, but
two-time award winning,
but not just
Tony
that,
Award,
just the people I'm around. We were doing a photo shoot for Jagged Little Pill maybe a month ago, and me and Alanis Morissette were taking a picture together, and I said, if you told my college self that I would be here posing with you for pictures, I would never believe it. And here we are, and we're friends and collaborators. Green Day, the Go-Go's. All those artists, those brilliant artists on SpongeBob.
Oh, Head Over Heels, I love that music.
Such
good music.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm doing what I dreamed of doing, which is not just creating art, but working with the people that I've grown up idolizing and suddenly find myself in the room with.
Wow. Actually, I wanted to get to this at the very beginning, and we just glossed right over it. But I wanna get you to explain for the listeners and for me the difference between music supervisor, orchestrator, arranger, and composer.
Okay. So composer means composing the music, or if you're composer lyricist, music and lyrics.
So composer is without
composer is
words.
just writing.
Yeah.
Yep, you're a writer. Orchestrator means that you get compositions handed to you in some form, and then it is your job to write the orchestral parts, whatever that orchestra is going to be. So,
do you know, or do you get to pick what instruments are in it?
You pick at the beginning of the process, and there are a lot of factors that determine that.
Give me a triangle over here.
Yeah, if you're going to have a big percussion rig, you're going to have strings, you're going to have horns. So the orchestrator, really, that's the job of the orchestrator. The arranger, and an arranger can be any kind of arrangements. I mean, there are vocal arrangements where you're writing the vocal parts. For the arrangements, it's really if you take a composition and then you continue to work on it in rehearsal to add sections to it, to maybe add a different feel to it. But basically, to continue to hone the composition in a way that that you augment what was originally given to you to serve the show. There were a lot of arrangements I did on SpongeBob, for example. If you look at the song "No Control," which came from David Bowie and Brian Eno, and is a brilliant, very moody, evocative song, but I was going to have to figure out vocal arrangements, and then it was going into dialogue section, so there was underscoring, and then this little section would suddenly have to drop down, so I would have to deviate from the original feel in the song. So you're rearranging the song a little bit. And if you're the arranger or orchestrator, which I've been on things like Head Over Heels, American Idiot, you can hear there are times where the form of the song is a little different than the original. The colors within the tone, taking something like 21 Guns, starting it just on strings and making it smaller, or What's Her Name even at the end. So those are all where I think of arrangement. And then when I get the arrangement to a place where it's ready to undergo orchestration. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then music supervisor basically means that you oversee the entire musical element. So a music director who you'll work with, but get to sit back and hear the way the music is starting to sing and feel, and then give notes and work with that. Work on the sound. Work with sound design. Really, and then if there are obligations like appearing on programs, talk shows, or doing performances, all of that. Basically, just making sure that you're always speaking for the music, whatever the demands are.
Do you have a favorite?
A favorite what?
A favorite role?
I think I like composer. I've always wanted to be a writer, and all of it is a form of writing. But to create a song from scratch and have it be your thing is I think still the thing that I
watch it
live for.
travel through its many forms. Yeah.
Yeah.
SpongeBob really impressed me because it did feel like a cohesive, it was a cohesive musical, and all the songs were basically written by completely different people. So when you were handed all this music, did you work with the artist to make everything, or were you just like, we have a scene here, here's an outline, give me something, and then I'll arrange it later?
It was really very trusting process. The authors would work with Kyle Jarrow and Tina Landau. Tina would get a demo in some form and then have a back and forth with notes. And when it was ready to come to me, then I would do the arrangement, have it ready for rehearsal. So it would just be a piano vocal. We usually had just piano and drums in rehearsal, and then we would rehearse the song, and then I would orchestrate it for the production. I think this the best compliment that I've been given, which you just said, and which thankfully I think a number of people said, was that the score did feel cohesive. And I think the big reason is that all of those writers wrote fantastic theater songs. They spoke so honestly for the characters, and they nailed the moment they were asked to write for. So nothing felt out of place. So the cohesiveness comes from the synergy that was created by all of those writers bringing their skills and their passion to the project.
Yeah. It did seem like a completely uniform, linear thing to me, and I actually forgot. I knew about it going in, but I forgot afterwards that it was all the original authors. The writers were all completely different groups or bands or whatnot. So yeah, I guess that speaks to a little bit of or a lot bit of your talent to bring it all together.
I used to love Family Ties. I should say I still love Family Ties. And there was an episode that I loved where Michael J. Fox's character Alex P. Keaton ends up, I think, on 2 prom dates or 2 dates to a dance, and at the end of the episode, or towards the end, he has to share a first. He's managing to do it, and then there are then they ask for the dance. He has to do the spotlight dance, and two girls come onto the floor, and he just you see the camera, I think, from his back, and then he just kind of faints. And I had this image in my head of a similar thing where I would suddenly walk into the room of all the SpongeBob writers. There would just be one day that they would all show up in a room. I would just faint at seeing all of them in front of me and having to answer. But they, I can't say enough about how supportive they were, and they showed up in Chicago at opening night. They were at the Tony Awards. It was really, and again, people that I have admired and have been great inspiration to me. So it was a real privilege to work on their material.
That's what I would have loved to have met Bowie. He seems like he was a nice guy.
That would have been, he's meant a lot to me, and I felt honored that we had a composition of his in our show.
Yeah. So you've got not an EGOT. You're missing the Oscar, but you've got an EGT.
I'm the Grammy, so I've got a. I don't know, what would you call it?
Are you credited? You're credited with the Grammy because your work for with Green Day, right?
No, just I was just music supervisor.
Oh, so okay.
So, but the album did win a Grammy, which was a great thrill.
Well, so you've received a bazillion awards anyway. Looking ahead, is there something you want to do that you haven't gotten to do yet?
I would love to, I think, work more in film. I just have been, as I mentioned, watching the Superman film. Film's just always meant a great deal to me, and to get to write a movie musical, to show up and see on the big screen something you've created. I think that would be a great thrill for me.
We didn't even touch on that. Yeah, you've written for TV too. How did that come into your career?
Really through theater. As we've all seen, there's been so much of theater people going out into film and television and pop music and then people from those worlds coming into theater. So really just I've gotten pulled into projects. John Logan, who I'm writing Superhero with, pulled me into Penny Dreadful to write a song, and the writers of Royal Pains were looking to make a musical episode, and I got I went in and met with them, and thankfully got hired and had a blast doing that. So so it's really just been when an opportunity comes, and especially if people are looking to do a musical, they want people who have been through that process.
Mhm.
So it's been great when I've gotten that chance. And the other thing that I'm really excited about, and it's still being worked on, but it looks like after 23 years of trying to get a record deal, it looks like I'm actually going to be making a record.
Congrats!
It's not official, but there are talks and that I'm going to get to do this, and that would be a great thrill for me because, as I said, it's something I've always dreamed of doing, and I just have this idea in my head that I'm going to attempt to do this Born to Run kind of thing, where I just want to create a soundscape. I want to have orchestral stuff. I want to do a sort of throwback record, and if I could, maybe even try to record it in the way that it was recorded analog in back in the 70s and 80s and probably 90s too.
Would you do any vocals, or would it be all orchestration?
Yeah, the songs I've written, maybe songs from shows. Maybe I get friends to come in and do duets or trios, whatever I can. But it'd just be great to make that kind of a statement, because I used to take my vinyl and arrange them on my floor. I would take all the Billy Joel albums and arrange them chronologically, and I still to this day read the liner notes, and so I just that would be a tremendous moment for me to actually make a record.
It sounds like you need to partner up with Ben Folds.
I would love to partner up with Ben Folds any time. He's I met him. He back in 2004, I believe. I was part of this wonderful concert, which was a concert version of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and Ben Folds performed Gray Seal, which was thrilling to watch. So he's I was actually talking with Brian Yorkie. We were talking about cassette players, and I said I still remember when you gave me mixtapes of all the Ben Folds music to introduce me to. So yeah, I think he's a brilliant writer and just a killer pianist. And so yeah, anytime I could be in the room with him,
he's what is it? The artistic consultant for the Lincoln Center.
Oh, really?
Or sorry, the Kennedy Center in DC.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's the first ever. So he's like bringing modern, I guess, the younger crowd to the older style of music. And
That's
he's
really
done
cool.
like with Sarah Bareilles and Regina Spektor and a couple other pop artists that he's brought them in and done duets with them with a full orchestration behind them.
That's so cool. There's an album that he recorded. I don't know if it was on a college campus, but it's just Ben Folds live, and it's him just at the piano, and I listen to it all the time. It's just so fantastic to hear him on the piano. He rips it up, and
it's so fun.
And yeah, those songs are so great.
Well, you are you're pretty good yourself, so don't sell yourself short. So we've got 3 closing questions here that I ask everybody on the podcast.
Great.
Very simply, number 1, what motivates you?
Achievement. To every day do something that I haven't done, and to keep challenging myself to make stuff that matters, and my family to not just be able to provide for them, but to put things into the world that make them proud and that affect them.
What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
I would say find the things that matter to you. Make sure to always educate yourself. Be looking for inspiration everywhere. Don't get caught up in anything that feels easy or lazy. This wasn't a problem for me growing up as much, but you can always be checking a phone. You can always be looking at a screen. Stare into space. Let your mind wander. Because there are so many times where I thought to myself, I'm tired. I don't want to get on the piano today. All right, I'll get on the piano. And then suddenly I wrote, I Miss the Mountains. So just see every day as an opportunity to have something in the world that was not there.
Last question. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
And this is one Broadway, one musical, one anything?
Interpret it as you will.
Oh, so like show, any show.
Show, anything you want.
Wow.
I made it super easy.
I think if I could see one show the rest of my life, it would be Into the Woods. I just, I get lost in that story and that score, and I always hear new things in it. And what it says, what it just speaks to me in terms of its themes, its beauty. Yeah, I just adore that show, and it meant so much to me. I played the Wolf and the Prince in high school, and I tell James Lapine all the time. I say, this show really changed my life. I'm so grateful to you for writing it, and of course to Stephen Sondheim.
Yeah. I think it's funny how Bonnie Milligan is always like, I want to be the baker's wife. She's on Twitter all the time saying that.
She would be a great baker's wife.
Yeah.
She would be a great baker's wife.
I think it needs to happen. You heard it here not first, because she's been saying it for a long time.
We are just here for support.
Yes. So you are on social media at Tom Kitt Music on Instagram.
Yes.
I couldn't find you on Twitter. Are you on Twitter?
Not Twitter.
Yeah,
not
Twitter.
Facebook. No, just the Instagram.
Just
account.
the Instas. Okay. And then everybody listening, of course, get your tickets to see Superhero at Second Stage. It's 2st.com is their website, and it's a limited run. Opens tomorrow, which this is going to air. We'll air this episode next week, so it will have just opened, and it's running through March 31st. At this point, hopefully it will continue beyond that. I don't know if that's possible. You can get more of me at theater_podcast on Instagram and Twitter, facebook.com/official theater podcast. Listen and subscribe and share and rate this podcast to get more of these amazing interviews. And we are produced by Jillian Hockman, and thank you to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music. And once again, Tom Kitt, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.